And welcome back to our second part of the lecture today on proteins. This will be the last of our biomolecules, at least until we talk about DNA in a couple weeks. But that'll be right before Christmas. Yes, Christmas is almost here, but Thanksgiving first. So we just talked about lipids. Hopefully you wrote down the key points to lipids. And similar to lipids, we're going to focus on the elements and functions of proteins and also the building blocks of proteins. At the end of this, I'm going to have you guys build a chart. I'll kind of get you started on it. It's going to be your assignment that goes with the notes today, kind of putting everything for carbs, lipids, and proteins together. Proteins are kind of the be-all of life. Oftentimes people talk about the be-all of life being DNA, but what we'll learn later is DNA is just telling us how to build proteins. Proteins are really the thing that makes everything work in our bodies and our cells or any living organisms. I like to think of it as if our body or cell is a house or a school. The proteins are the metal, the screws, the roof, the shingles, the drywall. Everything that goes into building life is the proteins. And then they are also the tools that put life together or tear things apart to make life work. So proteins really do a ton of things, where fats, they're a little bit of the material because they make the cell membrane, and they're good at communicating, but proteins are too. And then really the rest are almost for energy, and proteins are really what makes things happen. So proteins are super, super important for life, and super, super important for our diet as well. So like carbohydrates, they have 4 calories per gram, so they actually have a lot of energy in them. Same as carbohydrates, not as much as fat. But there's a reason we don't use them as much for energy, because they have so many other jobs that if we're using them for energy, we're in trouble. We want to be using other things for energy. So chemical composition, the elements that make up proteins are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur. So I like to think of them as chons. Okay, so proteins are chons. Always know of some examples of where we get protein in our diet, because I think that's the best way to relate these biomolecules is our food, because they are the molecules that make us. We have to get our food from other things. We call this heterotroph. We eat other things to get the molecules to build us. And things that are high in protein are meats, nuts, really high in protein. Some spinach leaves and stuff have protein, but meats and nuts are our real big protein places we get them. Beans, legumes, those kind of things, very important for protein. So if you are a vegetarian, awesome for you. You're probably helping the environment a lot right now, especially that we're overcrowding the earth as humans. But make sure you're getting your proteins. They're super, super important. And so you need to make sure you're eating lots of beans, lots of legumes, lots of nuts and stuff, so you get all of your proteins, because they're super, super important for your life. So meat, nuts, beans, cheese, all high in proteins. When we think of proteins, we oftentimes think of muscle, because our muscles are mostly protein. But like I said, proteins have all kinds of jobs. We are going to go through a lot of functions of proteins. Carbohydrates was easy. You had energy, 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 and structure for plants. Fats, you had insulation, protection, and energy, 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 also making hormones. Proteins, the list is large. So we're going to go through quite a few of these, and I want you to at least be able to remember 2 or 3 of them. So to give you an idea of how important proteins are, a typical cell has at least 9,000 different types of proteins, and those are just different types. They might have hundreds of each of those types, so proteins are huge. The human body alone, we know of at least 100,000 different proteins in our body. Okay, they make up 50%. If we took all the water out of our cell, they make up 50% of our cells. So proteins are super, super important. And here we go through some of their functions. One of the first ones is structural support. This is for the whole body and the cell. So things like hair, all protein. Skin, mostly protein. Nails, all protein. So tendons that hold our muscles to our legs, protein. Ligaments, protein. Muscles, a lot of protein as well. Bone, protein. So protein, huge thing for structure. Enzymes, we're going to go on these ones quick, but we're going to talk about these actually next class a lot. We're going to do lab on them because they are the tools of life. So enzymes, I just want you to know they're super important tools of the body. They're the things that put things together. They take things apart. They're really the things that build your body, build your cell. They break down your food that you eat so that we can use it as energy. They put that food back together to turn you into a living body. And they also speed up reactions. So we'll talk about that as well and do a lot of lab on enzymes. So we'll come back to those, but super, super important tools of the body. If you can understand one function of proteins, and if any of them I need you to understand the most, it is enzymes. We also use proteins to transport things. So they transport things in your cell. There's actually little things that walk, like little proteins that walk stuff across your cell and like move things. You also have hemoglobin that transports oxygen throughout your body, all kinds of things for transport. Hormones, so remember hormones were fats as well, but a lot of our hormones that we talked about the other day, insulin, glucagon, next semester we'll talk about adrenaline and some other ones, they're actually made from proteins. So some hormones are fats, some hormones are proteins. What hormones do is they send signals to your body to tell it to do something. Like insulin, little review, because that's in this unit, insulin tells your body to lower blood sugar. Glucagon raises your blood sugar. So they're little signals to your cells to do something, to tell your body to do something. Adrenaline increases your heartbeat, increases how much blood flows through you, so you're much stronger. So hormones, cool. Pigments are proteins, things that give you colors.
Please come to the office. There's pigments down here.
Okay, so pigments, the melanin in your skin. So if you have freckles or darker skin or lighter skin, that is all caused by proteins. In plants, the color of flowers are caused by proteins. The color of your eye are proteins. So color is most of the time from a pigment. So you can think a lot of the pretty colors we have in the world to proteins. When we start talking about our defense system, you hear this in the news all the time, antibodies with COVID, they are proteins. We'll talk about them a lot. Pretty cool little things next semester that can attach to viruses or bacteria and basically enable them so that they can no longer harm you. So that's why you hear about antibodies a lot and how they can be very helpful for fighting diseases. And last thing, proteins can be a good source of energy. Okay, so they do have a lot of energy, but they are our last source of energy. And I want you to think to yourself, why would I want them to be the last source of energy? Why would I want to use fats and carbohydrates for energy first? I'm giving you a second to think about that. Hopefully you guys take the time to think. Thinking is so important for the world, for your mind. It builds neural pathways. Thinking is like the coolest thing you can do. Ponder on something, try to figure stuff out in your head. I mean, if there's anything in life that you could learn in school is just learn to think. Try to figure things out. Don't just be blah, laissez blah, just try to figure things out and come up with an idea. I like to sometimes think of science as BS. You're just bullshitting, trying to figure things out. And sometimes when you do that, you're actually really smart and you figure things out. So hopefully after thinking about this, the reason it's your last source of energy is because of all these other things, because we need it to make our defense system to protect us. We need proteins for there first. We need them to make colors. We need them to make the hormones that tell our body what to do. We need them to transport things. We need them to build and break down things. We need them for our structure and everything else. So if we're using them for energy, they're not being used for those other things. So unless we have a lot of protein in us, your body tries not to use them for energy. But they do still provide energy, so really cool. Almost done with notes. Last part 4 we're going to talk about is the building blocks of proteins. Little review. Building blocks or monomers of carbohydrates were saccharides, monosaccharides, and then you get disaccharide, polysaccharide. For fats, it was fatty acids and glycerols. And for proteins, one that we really need you to know is something called amino acids. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So proteins are made of a lot of these amino acids put together. And unlike fatty acids where they're very similar, or sugars where they're very similar, there are 20 different amino acids. Okay, you'll hear about these in health class as well, and we'll talk about them here. There are 8 essential amino acids that we must eat. As humans, we must eat these. If we do not eat these, we will have many issues and eventually die. So we have to get 8 of these amino acids from our food. The other 12 we can actually build from other amino acids. So here's the chemical structure of amino acid. This is the same in all of them, and this is the same in all of them. And then you have this thing called an R chain, and that's where we have 20 different types to give different shapes, to give different functions. Here are the 20 amino acids. You need to memorize them by tomorrow. Actually, I will never do that to you. Maybe you've heard of a few of these, like tryptophan, found in turkeys, helps us make serotonin. Serine, trying to think if there's any other you would know. Probably not. But so 20 different types of amino acids. They have different characteristics, like some are polar, like water. Some are hydrophobic, like fatty acids. Some form these things called disulfide bridges, and they attach to each other different. So what I want you to get out of proteins is their function. Their shape causes function. And as we learn more about proteins later, DNA gives the order of amino acids. So this would be what we call a polypeptide chain. This is the start of a protein. And each of these is a different type of amino acid. And depending on the order of these amino acids, the protein will fold into different shapes and do different jobs. So the order of amino acids determines the function of a protein. So maybe that order causes it to look like a certain color, or maybe that order allows it to chop starch into sugar. Okay, so the function is determined by the order of these things called amino acids. So very important that we know about them. We'll get more into these essential things. So essential, what's pretty cool is if I eat these 8 essential amino acids, which are these solid colored ones here, boom, 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 our body actually has proteins that can change this amino acid into this amino acid, or this amino acid into this one. Okay, so this one can make all of these, this one can make all of these, green can make these, pink makes that one, right? And so as long as I eat these 8, my body's able to make all 20. But humans are unable to make these 8. So if you don't eat them, you really start to cause problems in your body because you don't have the right protein materials to make good proteins. So once again, if you're a vegetarian, it's important you eat a variety of different beans and legumes, because meat will have all 8 of these. A bean may have this one, this one, this one, and then so you have to eat a different bean that has this one, and this one. Okay, so I'm going to end with that. We're going to talk a lot more about proteins. We're going to talk a lot more about amino acids, and we are going to talk a lot more about enzymes because they're awesome. And we will do that in class. And for online, we'll be doing that in another lecture and also be doing some labs on that. Have a great day. Actually, before we end, your assignment today is to open up Google Docs, and you're going to have a chart. Okay, and on this chart, I want you to fill it in, and I'll get us started. So it's going to be like types. So it's going to be the biomolecule. Haven't figured out how to do that yet. So hold with me for a minute. Okay, so I want you to do your biomolecule. And you guys have this in a nice chart. I'm just trying to draw it quick. And then I want you to put the elements. Okay. I want you in that chart to fill in the building blocks. And function. And what we do here is all those notes you've taken, we're going to build them into one little document. So if we need them for a test, we have all the most invaluable information here. So if we have carbs, okay, their elements are CHO. Okay, building blocks, monosaccharides, functions, energy, right? You're going to fill that in on your own. Lipids. We can know the elements of those are CHO. Okay, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Their building blocks, fatty acids, and then the functions that I gave you. Okay, and then you're going to do protein. and they are chons. Okay, and then you're going to give me the building blocks, amino acids, right? And then the functions, at least pick 4 or 5 of them. And what this is good for, so what you're doing on this is a good skill. If you want to be successful in school, this will be successful to use charts in the future. Is now instead of going through all my notes when I'm taking a test or something, I have everything right here, right? I can be like carbs, elements. I know their building blocks. I know their basic functions. Now, maybe there's some other information I gave you, but this is at least the core material, and you can easily access it. So that is your lecture questions that you're going to do today. Instead of doing a test, I'm going to actually have you guys build this chart. And that is all for you. I can't wait to do enzymes.